Peter, that is a tough act to follow. That is a tough act to follow.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a great privilege to be here tonight, but also a huge challenge to me to speak after Prime Minister Netanyahu. So please, forgive me. But I represent a country which is among the very few, sometimes the only one, that speaks up for the interests of Israel. And believe me, it's not easy. It's not easy when you're alone and you vote alone against biased decisions which are prepared by other countries in the European Union or in the UN, when just a handful of countries are voting together with the US and for the sake of Israel. Because all these organizations are very, very biased by now, and we have to continue this work together. Now, if you allow me, I prepared a few thoughts. Let me read this. So 2 weeks ago, April the 16th, we observed a memorial day for victims of the Holocaust in Hungary. And I had the privilege to address, on behalf of the government of Hungary, those who had gathered there. As I stood within the walls of the synagogue in Pava Street, I saw not only the leaders of the Jewish community, diplomats and state officials, but also survivors of the Holocaust and their descendants. I tried to express my gratitude for the staying power of the community and for the patriotism of those who still consider Hungary their home. On that day, we remember the time when no one stood up to protect the Jewish people from pointless hatred. Within the walls of the synagogue, through the silence of the remembrance, the echoes of that historical failure, of the inaction, the betrayals, could still be heard. And today, again, we live in a world where hatred is growing. In Hungary, we were deeply shocked by the brutal terrorist attacks of October the 7th, 2023. It was just 2 days later that I spoke at what was supposed to be a pro-Israel summit celebrating the Abraham Accords, to what quickly turned into a solidarity event with Israel and the Jewish community. On that day, I made many new friends in the Israeli and Jewish American community. I watched as many of them continued forward with the conference when I'm sure they were falling apart on the inside. Their strength on that day in Budapest was remarkable. And one of those friends is in the audience with here today. Is Brian Lieb. Please, Brian. And Brian and I, we formed a bond immediately, and we have remained friends ever since. I told Brian and those at the conference that Hungary will stand with Israel even when the world starts to turn on you again. And ladies and gentlemen, sadly, after a brief wave of sympathy, the harsh reality emerged. Much of the world shifted to blame onto Israel, relativizing and even justifying what happened on October the 7th. Relativizing and justifying the attacks by Hezbollah targeting hundreds of thousands of civilians in the north of Israel. Relativizing and justifying the ballistic missiles attacks launched from Iran or Yemen. But Hungary has strongly resisted this wave of double standards and hypocrisy. Because we understand the importance of Israel's right to self-defense, Israel's right to protect its national identity and values. And we share these values and stand by them. We stand with Israel to call things by their name, to call a terrorist, and to call self-defense what it truly is, namely the right and duty of every sovereign nation to do everything in its power to protect its citizens. And we must not forget about the hostages. Among them, actually, there is one individual holding a dual Israeli-Hungarian citizenship, Mr. Omri Mirana. We express our strongest solidarity and our conviction that peace can only be achieved through the release of all the hostages. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an important thing that Hungary is now well known for: our readiness to defend our Jewish community from betrayal and hatred. And the government of Hungary and Prime Minister Viktor Orbán personally have declared zero tolerance for anti-Semitism, an old phenomenon on a new rise in Western Europe and also in North America. And the results of the Hungarian government's long-standing fight against anti-Semitism are clearly visible by now. Our criminal code prohibits hate speech and the use of totalitarian symbols. And after the October 7th attacks, we did not allow pro-Palestinian protests to be organized because we clearly saw through Western European and American examples how such protests turn into anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic outbursts. Moreover, Hungary, often alone, stands up in the United Nations and the European Union against statements and initiatives to blame Israel. Arms embargoes have been introduced. Legal proceedings have been launched. The International Criminal Court has cast aside its impartiality and any rational legal argument in order to persecute Israel. So, it is no coincidence that Hungary has announced its withdrawal from the International Criminal Court. And it is not a coincidence that Prime Minister Netanyahu's only visit to a European country since the outbreak of the war was to Hungary. And I think this really reflects the depth of this friendship and of this alliance between our two countries and the steadfastness of our support. Hungary and Israeli bilateral relations have been steadily strengthening for a long time, one of their key pillars being the security and support of the Jewish community in Hungary. We are restoring synagogues and Jewish cemeteries. We take Holocaust education very seriously and develop curricula in close cooperation with the representatives of our Jewish community. Today, Budapest is home to the largest Jewish community in Central Europe, who can freely and safely practice their religion, wear religious symbols, and live their Jewish identity without fear. We call this the Jewish Renaissance in Hungary. And I can say with great pride that today Hungary is the safest country and the safest place in Europe for Jews. Ladies and gentlemen, a safe and stable Israel is vital not only for the Middle East, but for the entire world. We viewed the signing of the Abraham Accords as a significant and very innovative and very successful step forward, as it created new opportunities to strengthen peace and security in the region. We sincerely hope that Israel, the Middle East, and the world will soon return to the path of building bridges. And I would like to assure everyone in this room that Hungary will be among those nations who stand by Israel in this endeavor. Israel's security and sovereignty must be guaranteed at all costs, and you can count on the government of Hungary to remain your ally in this effort in the future as well. We are all patriots here, so let's continue our work and our fight together. Thank you so much for your attention.